Welcome to ARTV. I'm here with Eloah Paes Ramalho. I I want to pronounce your name right. Will you actually say it for me?
Yes, you did it very closely. Eloah, Paes Ramalho.
And you're from Brazil?
I am, yes.
Nice. I first became aware of the work that you're doing through the Inner Lyrics Summit, and I think we just have
Mm,
some mutual friends and colleagues, and we got into conversation, and I got fascinated about how you're innovating and adapting authentic relating to some of your
mhm.
offerings. But the place I want to start in our dialogue is like you did this summit called Inner Lyric. What does that mean?
Yeah, it took me some time to find the name, and it started off from I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Mead. It's this, famous storyteller from the US, and he talks often about just our inner music or something like that. And I think for me, it's about finding, like, the summit is an invitation to spark that curiosity to unravel and write, right? Like our inner lyrics. So that that just means, some sort of fabric of possibility that each person um, uniquely carries, right? Um,
So
and
they're
we, yeah.
so they're on their authenticity.
Yeah, you could say that, and also their capacity to create. So, I mean, authenticity for me is so much about in relation, right? Like how
Mhm.
to we can only be authentic in relation to something. So, yeah, then it's also about singing or performing that inner lyric um, to to
Mhm.
somebody else or to the world in service of the world. So also the guests and people that came to facilitate were really just people that I see are have been on a journey of sharing their inner lyric, right, and
Mhm.
supporting others to get a taste or enticing them to see what it might be for them.
Beautiful. Yeah, sometimes I think of authentic relating as a journey of self-discovery, which is
Hmm.
discovering our authenticity or our inner music. Um, by bumping into each other in relationship and then working it out.
Yeah, and a lot, like if you've ever composed a song, I've just recently like written my first song,
Oh,
and it's so much about what it's not, like
hmm,
that, like, no, that's not exactly the tune, especially when we're creating with somebody else, like there was a friend in the guitar, and I hear this music in my head,
mhm.
and to be able to translate it, right, and this person is trying to figure out what it is, and by the melody that I'm singing they're trying to grasp what I might be like, in which direction I might be going, and it's like, no, not that way, not that way, not that way. Oh, a little bit like that, or like, oh, I like that, maybe, yeah, let's work with this for a little bit longer.
Yeah. I spent so many years as a musician. I started playing guitar when I was 15, and there was two guys on my block who played guitar, and they were like, I was thought they were so cool, and I was like, Dad, will you buy me a guitar? He's like, Oh, there's one in the basement, and so I just went down in the basement, and then
Mhm.
a couple months later, they were like forming a band, and they're like, if you want to join the band, Jason, you got to buy a bass. And so that's how I became a bass player. And for like the next 15 years of my life,
Wow.
performing bass in like all kinds of coffee shops and bars with so many different bands, it was actually the biggest part of my life. And I actually attribute my some of my skill as a facilitator to that experience of like being in the garage or rehearsal space with other musicians, and it's like you have to listen at the same time as you're playing,
Yeah.
right? And there's so much about communication that's about attunement and timing, and
Mm.
I call it it's like listen while you express. In other words, notice how you are music is affecting another person. So you can actually just modify the melody as you're going to be more in tune with them,
Mm.
right? So much of, yeah, embodiment. That's why embodiment comes into authentic relating, is about being in tune with the other person.
100%. And like one of my biggest passions is dancing, and a lot of the facilitation work that I did is also using dance as a metaphor and partner dance as a metaphor, and to be able to both inhabit my own body and dance with another person. It's exactly what you're saying, right? To be able to attune and fine tune and listen to the other people that are playing, to the audience that is listening, which is also playing with you, because as they smile and as they groove, like
Mhm.
that's also composing the music.
Yeah.
Um, but to be able to, like, in the midst of all that, still find your fire, like still find your inner lyric, your spice. I think that's what's exciting, like to keep bringing energy um, to to a space without necessarily needing the space to generate that for you.
Mm, beautiful. Uh, so I want to talk a little bit about your community, because you have been doing authentic relating games there, and bringing that modality into your work around self-love, is it?
Yeah. So a few months ago, I started what I call a co-loving community.
Mhm.
And the idea of that is a community to self-love together. Um, and basically, it started off, like my self-love journey started hardcore when I was 22, 23. And people used to tell me, you just have to learn how to love yourself, like that's the most important thing. And I literally got so angry, like in my mind, I just wanted to like punch these people in the face and say, like, what does that even mean? Um, like, I'm a very practical person and I wanted
Yeah.
steps, like, okay, so what do I do? Do I take myself on a date? Do I ask myself questions, which are like actually really good, great exercises to do. Um, but I didn't want people to think or feel that they are on that journey alone, right? Because at the
Mhm.
time, it kind of felt like I was the only person that needed to know how to self love, and everybody else knew it, and
Yeah.
everybody else had it. So in this online community, we have a group of people who really just are there for each other as accountability partners to show up and on a regular basis have the intention to show some type of self-love. And that could be anything. That could be a 3-minute check-in in the day about what your intention for the day is, or how you're feeling, how you did today. um,
Mhm.
it could be an authentic relating session, so you can just allow yourself some fun and you can allow yourself to connect authentically. Um, and in these, like, we do daily check-ins and weekly check-ins, and sometimes it's moving the conversations that pop up naturally, just out of checking in, people saying, I've lost it, like I thought I was on a good track and I'm having a really bad day.
Mm.
And and then seeing like these small gestures from the community, like where everybody just gather their efforts to share, like, I've been there, like we always have days like this, and do you want some suggestions of like what I do on these days? And they ask, yes, please. And it's simple things like, I just cook myself a nice meal, or I just go outside to feel the fresh air.
Mhm.
um yeah, so for me, that's priceless, to see people daring to say, I'm having a bad day, and not on social media, on platforms that we use WhatsApp at the moment. So to be able to take a platform that is so dry and is so mindless, like in the way that we normally use it, and see people really dropping in and sharing a text that has so much life and so
Mm,
much vulnerability, with people that are in different parts of the world, and that's why this group is also so well curated,
mm,
and it really works for folks who are interested in meeting other people and who are genuinely invested in their journey,
mhm.
of self-love.
Yeah. And I think before our interview, you said you do monthly authentic relating games with this group, right? But it sounds like a lot of the other things that are happening is also authentic relating in the sense that it's mutual support. You're getting into the relational, you're really
Mm,
sharing vulnerably about your humanness and
mm.
giving and receiving support, and then you have this context around self-love, which I love the phrase co-loving community.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's because, yeah, I had a similar experience when I listened to some new age gurus and teachers and all these people talk about self-love. It's like, wait, how do you do that? Like, um, even the things that are very profound, that even profound wisdom that you could put it on a meme and post it to Facebook or Instagram or something like that. Um, we kind of are digesting all of this kind of bite-sized wisdom through these
Mm,
mediums right now, but real education on how to do it, how to
mm,
put it into practice. Authentic relating, uh, one of the things that I was really passionate about in developing the curriculum, um, was we have this idea about being present and, like, be here now was like a huge book in the early 70s, and then the power of now was like the biggest book ever in the 2000s, right? It's like, um, well, what does that mean? How do you do it? How do you be in the present moment? How do you
mm,
know when you're not? How do you know how to get back? How do you know how to help someone else be present? Um, it's kind of like anchoring in a certain way. Um,
mm.
I think we anchor one another with our presence and our embodiment, and there's ways of communication that help someone anchor.
Yeah.
You know.
I love that. And I think that's it. It's like we got so much power to change narratives. We got so much power to change the the ways of these tools that we use, right? I also spend quite a lot of time on Instagram, and I know so many people that hate Instagram. And for me, it's like it's just a tool. And if we can really, I've done some authentic relating games on my Instagram stories,
Hmm.
and to be able to see how it kicks off conversation and how it really just creates a spark of possibility outside of the sleepiness that we're used to, outside of being consumers, which is, I think, a little bit of what you're touching on. Yeah, like I think it's beautiful and humbling and moving to learn, right? Like a child, to really step into this unknown, scary territory of applying tools that we know, or that we know, right? It doesn't really mean that like we know with our full bodies, to practice in different spaces. So um, to be able to distinguish, like knowing with our minds and then knowing, and the different places and circumstances that we really know. And the reality is, there is always a new situation and always a new relationship and always a new
Hmm.
scenario where we really don't know. So, yeah, I think I'm just excited about exploring those contexts
Hmm.
and situations as well.
Hmm. Beautiful. Well, what's kind of on the horizon for you? Like, uh, what's
Hmm.
next?
Geez. The first thing that comes to mind is like the possibility that I create, that I am for my life, the sentence that always comes is love that lights up the whole world.
Mm,
And I'm still not sure how that manifests, like in some capacity. I think I'm so excited for people to um, restore and create
mhm,
what love means, right? Like what love means in romantic relationships, what self love means, what love in community means. So I left Brazil almost 10 years ago, and like living um, as my own community, like self as a community also requires such openness to love strangers and to
mhm.
feel at home and with family, anywhere and with anyone and everywhere. So yeah, I think it's still forming, but definitely love is a big theme.
Mm. Yeah, love that lights up the whole world.
Hmm.
That's so beautiful. And
And
go
it's
ahead.
not even the intention, right? I think it's like we oftentimes, or I used to like really try and light up the whole world, if I were to say that, sort of like ego achievement or to feel important or to something of that extent, like service as some sort of conquering, some achievement. And now it's really, I'm so curious about experiencing more and more this delight that it is being alive, and to feel so grateful,
Mm,
that the expression of who I am just really lights up
mhm.
other people, because they just can't, because we're human and we mimic each
Yeah.
other. Yeah.
I love it. And, this idea of like creativity and practicality, they kind of live in a polarity. And it seems like you're starting with this dream or this vision. Um,
Mm,
and, this is actually something that was taught to me by one of my mentors 15 years ago. I think it's something that has really propelled my own, I wouldn't even call it career. It's like my own purpose
mm,
in the world has unfolded, um, because someone taught me how to vision. Someone
mm,
taught me how to um, envision creatively, 10 years into the future, and planting that seed like that, like you're saying, you don't know what
mm.
it is, but it's just this phrase that you kind of think about or contemplate. And I think so often our purpose is like that. Clarity um, is really nice, but sometimes it takes us a while to get to clarity. And the thing
Mm,
um, that actually really helps clarity is our ability to face our confusion, because
mm.
confusion and creativity are very similar. It's like you said earlier in the dialogue. It's like when you're writing music, there's a lot about trying things and having them not be right, right?
Yeah.
And facing the confusion or even the discouragement of that. Um,
Yeah.
and then and then slowly, like, the vision starts to take shape and starts to manifest into the world. And I'm really glad that we're going into this, because that this is actually the next phase of my work. Is like I'm literally teaching the thing that was taught to me 15 years ago from one of my mentors, in this next thing that I'm doing. And it's because I'm like you, I'm so practical, about 40% of the time. And then like 60% of the time, I'm like in dreamland and, want to be creative. And I'm like thinking about what's possible, right? The idea of like, oh, what would be possible if this group of humans came together? And so it's a real passion of mine to help people understand this polarity of what I call vision and embodiment, but
Mm.
it's also creativity and practicality.
Yeah, and to be able to sit with both, right? So, out of what these things that you're talking about reminds me of the session that I had with the client recently. And we were envisioning, like, right? Like I was asking her lots of questions around what would her ideal work will look like, like the workspace, who's there, who's not there, what part of the
Mhm.
work are you doing, what are they doing? When somebody enters your office, your space, like what kind of problems do they share with you? Like who do you refer to somebody else? And she started really, as it's fantastic actually how much clarity we have when we have the right questions.
Mhm.
And she got stopped halfway and she checked out. I could just see from her expression, and I said, what just happened? Like you're not here anymore.
Mm.
And she said, like, this is just dreamland stuff,
Mm.
like I mean, this kind of stuff doesn't exist. And I don't know if I want to be like thinking of my dream work, because like I also need to get real. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing, like to be able to, a lot of us get stopped from vision and going with all our hearts for the thing that we really want to, and that being a career, that being a relationship, um, for our health or whatnot. We get stopped before we even allow ourselves to really dream. And what we shift there in conversation was, so what, like, so what that this doesn't exist, and possibly doesn't exist because you're creating it. And if we're doing anything really creative, it doesn't exist anywhere else, and that's
Yeah.
perfect. But when we carry that vision in our minds, we're scanning the environment for it, right? So it's what you're saying. It's like, it's not exactly that. It's not exactly. It's a little bit of this. It's a little bit of that, and then you start directing your mind, like you start directing your life towards those things.
Mhm.
And it might not be your final job. It might not be your final relationship,
Mhm.
but you're more and more designing with what you have where you are.
Yeah.
um, and it's a game, right? If you're not tied to having it all right now in the way that you want,
Mhm.
um, but you're dancing with life and you're playing with life and the people around you, then it's fun.
Mhm. Yeah, it is fun to dance with life and dance with the people around you. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, even if they step on your foot, like there was another session with another person, and she's a dancer, and she was saying, just how frustrated she got in her relationship with her romantic partner, like when they wouldn't be on the same page about something. And I said, what do you do when somebody steps on your foot on the dance floor? And she was like, I don't know. I either give them direct instructions of like how to not do it, or I mean, do you go out and like you stop dancing because somebody stopped on your foot? Like you might just say, ouch, or I don't know, whatever, and then keep on dancing. And we tend to make such big things out of small things, instead of just dealing with what happened and moving on, and just working out when it's, how your body moves and the other person moves, and maybe let's get out of this crowded area. um, if it's, I don't know, if it's a relationship or if it's work, then we get really caught up in wrong making or blaming or understanding. It's like, there's nothing to understand. Somebody just stepped on your foot. Like, we move on.
Mhm. Yeah, our capacity for judgment and discernment is uh, so important for our survival
Mm.
that a lot of times we get stuck in stories because we're overthinking and we're using the capacity that we have for judgment and discernment, and applying it to a relationship when it's actually better left for problem solving or our career or it's like, and 9 times out of 10 I've found that it's actually pretty unhelpful for the relational dimension of life. And
Mm.
we have this teaching in authentic relating, like, there's these 3 different levels of conversation, we've called it, but it's also 3 different levels of connection. There's we can connect around the informational or the factual or the practical. And then we can connect around the personal, like what's happening over there for you and what
Mhm.
your hopes are for the future and what your challenges are with the past, what you're still healing. And same thing with me. Or we can be in the relational, right? Which is the relational is right here, right now. What's
Mm.
rising between us? And there's so much um, difficulty created when we bring that capacity of judgment into relationship. And
Yeah,
it's like,
there's a lot of layers to read. It's the
yeah,
same. So I love bringing dance as a metaphor. I don't know if you're a dancer, but it's really, really hard to partner dance with
mhm.
somebody that is trying to talk to you. So like either we dance or we talk, but like I can't be fully here in my
Yeah.
creative mode and dance with you and communicate with you on that level
Mhm.
if you're asking me a bunch of things or if I'm having to answer a bunch of things. So I think that's a little bit of what you're saying about, a little metaphor between the judgmental, like the judgment and the relational.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done some partner dancing, but I've done more contact improv. And similar, if you're judging yourself about how you're moving, it's very hard to get into flow, right? And actually, like the journey with contact improv, uh, really the first 10 times that someone comes into a contact improv event and does that kind of improvised style dance with your a point of contact with another person, you're going to come face to face with how much you judge your own movement. And if
Mhm.
you're not willing to be with or feel the awkwardness, which is confusion as well, like from earlier in our dialogue, if you're not willing
Mhm.
to be with and feel the awkwardness, you cannot get into flow. And in
Mhm.
fact, the more acceptance you have around, oh, we just had an awkward moment, we're smiling about it, and then we're just moving on really quickly, right? Um,
Yeah,
yeah. And
exactly.
yeah, and it comes back to embodiment, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes just naming it, right? So what you just said,
Mm.
like, oh, we just had an awkward moment, like to have that capacity to just name things,
Yeah.
or call it. It's like, oh, that was awkward,
Yeah.
or oh, what was that? Like, or oh, like, oh, you are you okay? Like these like very short sentences that like even kids would probably communicate to create or play anything. It's not a whole dialogue about something. It's just like in the moment, quick check-ins and then
Mm,
back
mm,
into what we're doing.
mm. Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you're out there in the world bringing the container for people to be co-loving, um,
Mm.
learning to love themselves by um, watching other people be on the journey to love themselves and supporting them. And yeah, that's such a beautiful project. And yeah,
Thank
it's really
you.
beautiful to have this dialogue with you. I love the metaphors you use when you speak.
Thank you so much, Jason. Yeah, I feel like we've been dancing in this conversation, so I'm like super curious also to hear and read what the people that are listening to, like what's emerging for them and what they're, what kind of moves they are dancing to. We might not be doing all of us live at the same time. But it's a conversation that is evolving. So I'm very interested to see the other folks' moves with us.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I hope we get to do more. I hope we get to find ways to play together. And yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's such a pleasure to be here and to have been invited. I feel really honored. Yeah, I'm excited for more.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.